And welcome back to another episode of the Chips Podcast, post-NFL Draft Edition. Tyler Melito alongside Ryan Amick. Ryan, how are you, sir?
Doing awesome. What a great draft it was.
Yeah.
3 days in a row, all 7 rounds. Nothing went wrong with the technical aspect of it, which is just great. I mean, this was also this was the most watched draft in NFL history, I believe. It had, I think, 55 million viewers the first night. It was just great spectacle.
I think it was very good. And Goodell looked like he was living his best life in that chair. So
maybe in rounds one for round one, but once it got to the end of round 3, you could tell he was tired. It was approached to midnight on a Friday. He was slouched in that comfy chair of his.
Well, because also when you think about it, for the second and third rounds, or second through 7th rounds, they usually have former players come do it, announce the picks.
He had to carry the load more than usual.
Yeah, so he had to do the whole thing. But anyway, usually we're both in school, as you know. The end of the semester is coming up, so we're about to get our final grades. So why not give grades, maybe not exact letter grades, but teams who we thought did really good, improved, did not do so good, and were what the heck is going on with that franchise. You good with that?
Yeah, and let me tell you, if all these teams were in a certain class, most of them would get a passing grade. I think a lot of teams did really well in this draft. I think this draft overall was just a major success, especially given the circumstances. It wasn't set up to be a success, but I think a lot of teams came through and added some good pieces to their teams.
Yeah, especially when the talent pool is so massive like this draft class was. You can't say that about every draft class, but almost every position, there were some really, really good players this year. And like you said, given the circumstances, I think teams. I agree with
that, and we'll see with our grades as well. I know for my grades, I have a lot of A's for a lot of teams. So without further ado, I say let's get right into them.
Sounds like you're the nice teacher. I don't think I gave out more than 6 A's out of
30. I could tell before we went on the air. It seemed like I was more of the friendly teacher.
Yeah.
You had some harsher grades, but I mean, hey, in reality, most of these grades might not be A's because not every team could get an A for this spot. And maybe I'm just thinking optimistically, but I think a lot of teams did well in this draft. And
you are Mr. Optimistic. So.
Yeah, and I kind of organized it into 2 different categories because I had so many teams doing well. So first, I think we should look at the teams that were already great rosters that were a rich team that kind of got richer with this draft and exceeded expectations and just are going to have an even stronger year next year with the players they got. And some of those teams are playoff teams like the Ravens. They had some of the biggest steals in this draft. I can't believe Patrick Queen fell to them at 28, arguably one of the best linebacker on the board, still available, fitting the one need that they had with C.J. Mosley departing a couple off seasons ago. They still needed someone to fill that gap because most of their defense already is solid, doesn't really need any help. So having someone like Patrick Queen fall to them was huge. And then I love the pick of J.K. Dobbins in the 2nd round because Mark Ingram, he's not going to last forever there. He needs someone to help take the load off too. And they're such a run-heavy offense that you need to get as many mouths in there as possible to feed. And I think he's also one of the best running backs in the draft. So that was great value at that pick as well. Also getting Lamar Jackson some aerial targets and Devin Duvernay out of Texas. I really like the pick out of Texas A&M of Justin Matabuki. He had a lot of scouts liked him as well. And a little surprised he fell to the 3rd round. And just overall, they had such a great draft for a team that didn't even need it. I mean, they have one of the most stacked rosters in the NFL, and they just got even richer, as I said earlier. Another team, this team made the Super Bowl, the Niners.
The Niners blew me out of the water, not gonna lie.
Their front office is run beautifully. I mean, I'm so impressed with how they've done so far. And, I mean, you look at their draft, they only had 2 first-round picks, and they didn't have another pick till the 5th round. But both of their first-round picks were home runs. You had one need in DeForest Buckner, trading him, and that's what got him that 13th overall pick. What do? They get his replacement in Javon Kinlaw, the second-best defensive tackle in most people's books in the draft, just a monster there. And then they get the top receiver on their board and Brandon Ayuk as well. With Emmanuel Sanders leaving, you do need to give Garoppolo some more weapons because really
and they traded Marquise Goodwin too.
He's a very good one. And him and Deebo Samuels are very similar in the fact that they do most of the work after the catch, and they take the load off of Jimmy Garoppolo. He doesn't have to make plays for them. He just gives them the ball maybe 5-10 yards down the field and watches them go. So those are 2 great picks, not to mention that they did get Trent Williams for the replacement for Joe Staley, who did retire yesterday or the day before, I believe.
Weekend,
So
yeah.
all three of their holes, they're very small holes that they had in their team, all three filled with great talent. And I mean, in terms of drafting and trading, the Niners just hit a home run as well.
I will say the one thing about the Niners that kind of disappointed me, I would have loved to have seen them get secondary help. They didn't draft a single safety or a single corner with guys like Richard Sherman getting up there in age, and you're in a division with guys like DeAndre Hopkins, Tyler Lockett, DK Metcalf, Cooper Kupp, among other guys. You need to have a strong secondary. I get it. San Francisco's thing is their pass rush, and that will usually fluster a quarterback. But if the pass rush can't get itself going, you need your secondary to be on point. And they just really didn't address that at all. I agree with you on that. Javon Kinlaw was a great pick, great value at number 15 or 14, and they traded back for Tampa Bay. But then they traded back up to get Brandon Ayuk.
Yeah, so, I mean, I feel like if they did have more picks in second, third, fourth rounders, so they could have addressed those needs. They just didn't have many picks in this draft, so they did what they could with them, and I think they did great with those picks. Obviously, though, their secondary isn't perfect. I mean, Sherman's still at a pretty elite level, and I think their safeties are pretty solid, but they're not going to last forever. You could have used some depth there, but otherwise, I mean, the Niners, you can't really complain with much of their roster. They're doing a really good job there.
The Niners draft circled around their trades. They traded away Marquise Goodwin to the Eagles. They got Trent Williams, and I believe they also traded away Matt Breida, who was a decent piece in their three-headed monster at running back. But they already have four running backs on the roster because Jerick McKinnon.
There. Yeah. I mean, Jerick McKinnon, you paid a lot of money towards. Then Raheem Mostert, who carried you to the Super Bowl in that NFC Championship game. And
Coleman in the divisional round.
Kevin Coleman is another solid piece as well. I mean, the Niners just whole squad is just phenomenal. They're doing a really good job out there. Another team that just added to their riches were the Bucs, who, I mean, before this offseason, you wouldn't consider them – they didn't make the playoffs. You wouldn't consider them one of the top teams in the NFC, but I think now undoubtedly they should be a playoff team and one of the most feared teams in the NFC. But all the offseason moves they made in free agency, and now the draft, they hit a home run as well. Got Tristan Wirfs at the 13th spot. They did have to trade up with the Niners, which was kind of odd. I feel like they could have got him at 14th. They didn't really need to trade up that one spot. But still, I mean, one of the top tackles on the board, you got him there. Antoine Winfield at safety, I think, is a great piece there. He's one of my favorite safeties in the draft, next to Xavier McKinney, who our Giants got, which is – I won't mention that right now, but I feel like that was definitely one of their best picks. Then for running back, they had a little issue there. They really only had one player on their roster that really could help with this team, but then they addressed that need in the draft, and I think they just added to their already crazy lineup of players.
I would have said I would have liked to have seen them get one more offensive lineman, because offensive line, you never know with injuries. So many crazy things happen. They're battling in the trenches. Tristan Wirfs is probably going to be a really good player at that position. He was projected to go as high as fourth to the Giants. But I would love to see him get an interior lineman to help against that interior pass rush that a lot of teams in that division have, with Grady Jarrett in Atlanta, Derek Brown now, who got drafted by the Panthers. I think they needed some help to get Brady, because Brady's not taking snaps out of the shotgun. He probably won't. He will be under center most likely. So they need to have someone who could really be an anchor. And Wirfs was good. I would love to have seen him get one more guy.
Yeah, line was definitely their biggest need in this draft. And although they got Wirfs, they could use some more depth there. It's kind of similar to the Niners' point. I mean, you would like to have more depth at your biggest need. There's only so much you can do. And I feel like what they did, they had good value. Moving on, staying in the same division, the Saints, another playoff team. They only had 4 picks in this draft, but 3 of them, I think, were just great values. First pick on Cesar Ruiz, helping that offensive line. Yeah, I have a steady offensive line, especially with Drew Brees there. He's getting up there in age. Injuries more susceptible when you get up there in age. So making sure the offensive line is steady is always a point of interest. Then in the 3rd round, this might be the biggest steal in the draft. Zach Bond lasted to the 3rd round somehow, and then the Saints smartly moved up, traded up to get him, snag him.
I had it in my 1st round of our mock draft. I think we both did.
I thought he was one of the Ravens, but they ended up being Patrick Queen that fell to them, and Zach Bond somehow slept on this much. He's going to be a nightmare on the edge for opponents, especially like the Bucks, they're gonna have to watch out for him coming on the edge out there. And then also in the third round, they got Adam Trotman, arguably one of the best tight ends in this draft. He's out of Dayton, so there wasn't much competition when he was in college. But I think just in terms of intangibles and just his play in general, I think that was a great steal for them.
And that
and
was
just the tight end position because Drew Brees loves his tight ends.
Yeah, that's true. I would have loved him to see him get another wide receiver, though, the Saints. I do agree with you. Ruiz, great pick. Bond, steal if he pans out to be as good as advertised. But I've loved him to get another wide receiver. Sure, they signed Emmanuel Sanders, but he's a little older. He had the Achilles injury a couple years ago, and who knows what other injuries are lingering. Michael Thomas just had the best season of his career, but like that production is going to fall, so someone needs to be catching the ball. And they just signed Jameis Winston, so who knows what's going on.
That's interesting what they're doing with their quarterback position because also their last pick, their fourth one, they drafted a quarterback. Then, as you mentioned, they signed Jameis Winston and extended Taysom Hill. So they have 4 quarterbacks on their roster. But I feel
Hill's not a quarterback. He's a weapon. He's a Swiss Army knife.
Yeah, and I feel like that's one of the weapons. Sure, they don't have 3 steady receivers. They really have 2. But also they have more tight end depth now. They have Alvin Kamara out of the backfield. They do have Taysom Hill they can use there. So I feel like they have enough weapons, especially Sean Payton's a smart offensive genius. I feel like what they have is enough, and what they needed to address more was defense, which they got in Zach Bond. So I really like what the Saints did, and they just got even better, even though they were one of the best teams in NFC to begin with before this draft.
Jared Cook is still on that roster, too, in New Orleans at tight end. So be a nice 1-2 punch with Troutman and Cook.
And you're seeing this a lot more. I'm noticing more 2 tight end sets, or at least teams that have multiple great tight ends. Like even the Vikings, they have Kyle Rudolph and Irv Smith.
Yep.
And some other teams that I can't think of off the top of my head. But I just noticed during the draft.
Tweaked it a little bit.
Yeah, and then the Patriots even drafted 2 tight ends in the same round. So multiple teams are looking to have multiple tight ends on their roster that can make an impact. And then finally, as part of my great teams that got even better in this draft, we have the Dallas Cowboys. I don't like to admit it, but I think they did really well in this draft.
They had the best draft, in my opinion. I felt like they had the best draft.
All right, I'll let you get into that in a second, but they had one of the biggest steals undoubtedly in CeeDee Lamb. Sure, at that position you would have liked them to go secondary, but second round they got Trayvon Diggs out of Alabama, helped fix that need. Third round, Neville Gallimore, he was projected to be around a second-round talent. Seeing him fall to them is also helpful for them because they did make some moves in free agency to get him help in the front 4. But I feel like guys like Gerald McCoy are getting up there in age. Alden Smith has been out of the league for years. You can't really rely on them. I feel like someone like Neville Gallimore is more of an impact player for them. And just those 3. Also, they did get a Wisconsin center to replace the Wisconsin center they just lost in Travis Frederick.
Yeah.
So I think, they definitely had one of the best drafts. And honestly, I'll let you add on to that and get into your list of A-graded teams.
Yeah. So the thing with the Cowboys, why I love their draft so much, CeeDee Lamb at 17, who was rated as their 6th best player on the board for the Cowboys, what Jerry Jones admitted. He fell to them. They didn't have a need at wide receiver, but the guy was too good to pass up, and it gives Dak another option, a guy who is yards after the catch machine. As someone who watches Texas football and Big 12 football, I know CeeDee Lamb is a bad man, to quote Stephen A. Smith. Trayvon Diggs arguably could have gone in the first round. They got him at great value toward the back half of the second round, which I love. And you mentioned Neville Gallimore on that line. I think it just adds another layer to that team. The pass rush, you mentioned, Gerald McCoy's getting a little older. Alden Smith, who knows what he's going to have. DeMarcus Lawrence needs someone else who could put pressure. Taco Charlton hasn't panned out. I think Gallimore can. And then, they got this replacement for Travis Frederick. They filled all their needs and then got more. The one thing now they have to do is sign Dak Prescott. Like, Jerry Jones, what are you doing, man? You got the giant boat. Just give that to Dak. I'm sure he'll take it.
But also, as you mentioned, they filled all their needs, and that's why it validates that CeeDee Lamb pick so much because the one criticism someone might have had is you don't really need wide receiver, so why waste a first-rounder on CeeDee Lamb? But at that point, you just go for the best talent available, which I really like when teams value more than needs, because you can address needs later in the rounds, and that's exactly what they did. And they got good value with the positions that they needed help with. So, yeah, just all around, we don't like to admit it that much, but Cowboys had a great draft.
And I'll branch off for you. Here's some teams that I thought did really well. Maybe they're not the playoff teams that we think of that could contend. But one, obviously, the Cincinnati Bengals. They got their franchise quarterback in Joe Burrow. They got a future successor to A.J. Green, possibly T. Higgins, who I love. I love watching his game. I thought he could be a first-round pick. Got slipped into the second round. Oh, he was the 30th.
Not too much, though. He was right off the board in the second round.
Right. He didn't fall too far. They filled all their needs. They got two guys who could start for them at linebacker, and Logan Wilson and Akeem Davis-Gaither in the third and fourth rounds, which was definitely something they needed help with. They needed some depth on defense. They still got a lot of work left to do, but the foundation is set. They got Joe Burrow. They got CeeDee Lamb, Tyler Boyd. A.J. Green is coming back from injury. Joe Mixon in the backfield. And they got some nice pieces on defense. So I'm excited for what they can do. Another team that wowed me was Arizona. The Cardinals, I thought, performed really, really well in the draft. And I'm pulling up my notes. They got Isaiah Simmons, who might be the best player in the draft. And he was the best player at linebacker given his skill set. And they got him at pick number 8. When you thought he was going at pick number 4, I thought he was going a little bit later. We both thought he'd be gone well before the Cardinals took him. Josh Jones fell to them in the third round, who had offensive line talent to be a first-round pick. And then all their picks, once again, they filled needs. And given the new playoff format, this team is definitely the third best team in this division in the NFC West and could compete for a wild card spot with all the moves they've made this offseason. I thought the Cardinals did a really, really good job.
And I'd argue even possibly the second best team. I mean, they similar to the Cowboys.
Them or Seattle.
Yeah, them though similar to the Cowboys. Their first pick, they didn't necessarily go with need. They went with value in the best player available in Isaiah Simmons. And then what did they need? What did they need? A tackle. And they got arguably a top 5 tackle in the third round, which is crazy to think about, that they got exactly what they needed and Isaiah Simmons as a playmaker on that defense. And also you look at their fourth rounders, 2 defensive tackles out of Utah and LSU. Those are great schools for defensive linemen as well. I mean, they addressed defense, they addressed offensive line. Those were their 2 biggest needs. They got Kyler Murray some weapons in the offseason. I think this team could bump Seattle for that second spot in their division.
Injuries obviously will always play a big factor, but I do agree with you.
That's why we can't necessarily predict, but based on what they've done, I wouldn't be surprised. And I do believe, especially with the playoff format expanding, that they could make a playoff run.
One other team of note that I really liked how they did, Minnesota. They got Justin Jefferson to be the replacement of Stephon Diggs, and honestly, he probably will be better than Stephon Diggs. I think given the season he has great hands, great catching radius ability, great size at 6'1", 202, and he'll only get built bigger once he gets into the league. He's opposite of Adam Thielen, so he doesn't have to worry about being doubled possibly right out of the gate. They got Jeff Gladney also in the first round, who you thought was going to be a first-round pick. I think I might have had him. I don't think I did, actually. At corner, you got guys in the NFC North, guys like Devontae Adams, guys like Allen Robinson, who you're going to have to lock down against. And they got rid of Xavier Rhodes, who Gladney, will he be Xavier Rhodes right away? No, but he could fill into that spot. And then Ezra Cleveland, they got in the back half of the second round. Offensive tackle. I thought he was going in the first round.
First round.
Yeah, he could be a guy to protect Kirk Cousins and provide holes for Dalvin Cook. I mean, top to bottom, I thought Minnesota, they ended up with so many draft picks. I think they ended up having the most picks in the entire draft through trades and whatnot, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, they had a record 17 picks. And top to bottom, I thought they got great value at all their picks, filled a lot of needs, and they have gotten better. They are probably now the best team in the NFC North because the Packers, I'm sure we'll talk a little bit later,
we'll get to them better.
Yeah.
But yeah, so as you mentioned, the 2 of those 3 teams I also had as A-grade teams I thought did really well in the Cardinals and the Bengals. I mean, you can't argue. They got some of the best picks in the draft in Isaiah Simmons and in Joe Burrow. And as I mentioned before, I kind of split my A-grade teams into two categories, as the teams that were already well and got better, and now teams that improved the most. You mentioned two of them. I also think you could add the Colts to that list, especially given that they didn't have a first-rounder, but they got first-round talent. Michael Pittman is one of my favorite receivers in this draft. I think he's so underrated just because he had a slow 40 time. That's the only knock you could have against this guy. He's just a long, athletic guy who's an easy target for Phillip Rivers and is a needed weapon. Him and T.Y. Hilton and even Paris Campbell, if he stays healthy this year, they're going to have plenty of weapons on the outside. And then a couple picks later, you get arguably one of the best running backs in the draft and a workhorse back in Jonathan Taylor, because Marlon Mack did have a good season for them.
He was hurt a little bit.
Sorry, say that again?
Marlon Mack does have an injury history, so Jonathan Taylor will be a nice backup. And one other thing about Michael Pittman before you continue. 40 speed doesn't necessarily always translate. Guy could be slow, but be really good on the field. And Michael Pittman, I think, is going to be one of those guys for Indianapolis.
Yeah, I love that pick in Michael Pittman. And then Jonathan Taylor right after, another great pick, just a workhorse back for them to take the pressure off of Phillip Rivers. And that offensive line there is one of the best in the league. I mean, him running through that is just going to be a problem for teams in the AFC. And then even Julian Blackmon, safety out of Utah. I mean, Utah is known for their guys out of secondary. I think they had 4 or 5 in the first 3 rounds drafted. I mean, you can't go wrong with that pick. And then they turn around and get Jacob Eason, 4th rounder. And aside from the top 5 quarterbacks that most people had on their board, I think he was top of this second class of quarterbacks in this draft. And I think he's a good replacement for Phillip Rivers once his time is done. So especially, you do still have Jacoby Brissett on the roster, but I don't think, based on what we saw last year, he's the answer. So you let Jacob Eason develop for that Colts team. And then once it's his turn, he has a great offensive line. He has weapons on the outside and has backs like Jonathan Taylor. I mean, offensively, they hit every spot the Colts did. And I think they had a very good draft. Continuing on, I think the Panthers also had a really good draft, not for offense, but for defense, considering that they only drafted defensive players, which is not something you always see, but almost every defensive player was a hit as well. The first pick, Derek Brown, I thought they might have gone Isaiah Simmons here. I think you could argue which one is of better value. They're both, at their position, they're definitely the best. And they're impact defenders. And if you're trying to build in the trenches like teams like the Niners have in the past, which has led to their rebuild going from the second pick to the Super Bowl, maybe this is something you do as well if you're the Carolina Panthers, getting Derek Brown. Then in the second round, getting a first-round caliber talent in Yetur Gross-Matos, one of the better edge rushers in this draft. So you secure that front line. But then a big need for them was secondary. You turn around and get Jeremy Chin, one of the more underrated safeties in this draft as well. He's out of Southern Illinois, so he didn't have much exposure. But I think he's a game wrecker for them. And then even Troy Pride out of Notre Dame, a notable corner that he won't impact them right away, but he's a good depth fit that if he learns in the system a little bit, he could help with their need in the secondary. It's not a perfect draft for them, and it was all defensive based because they really did need help on the defense. They lost so many defenders this year. I mean, look at Luke Kuechly,
James Bradbury to the Giants,
Bradbury, a bunch of Gerald McCoy in the front line. I mean, I think they did really well, really good job as well. And then the last team I have on here, I wasn't going to put them on as first because I know my list is pretty big for A-grade teams.
Very large list.
I really think a lot of teams did well in this draft. I have the Broncos mainly because –
Thank you for mentioning them. I was about to get mad at you if you didn't mention them because I
couldn't ignore, just like the Cowboys. I mean, they got a steal in Jerry Jeudy at the wide receiver position. We mentioned in our immediate response to the first round how they were going to – trade up to get this guy because they wanted him so bad, but he ended up just falling in their laps. One of the top receivers on their board just fell to 15, so obviously they'll take him there, give Drew Lock some much needed weapons there along with Cortland Sutton, and then they get a speedster in KJ Hamler out of Penn State in the second round. I thought it was a great pick as well. So, and then on the front line, Lloyd Cushenberry out of LSU, a nice center to help shore up that offensive line, which is starting to look like one of the more premier ones, especially in AFC. I think offensively they just made move after move in this draft, and I couldn't leave them out.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think I'll start with Indianapolis because that was the order you went. I'm interested to see what they'll do with Jacoby Brissett now that they took Jacob Eason. Maybe he's on the move. Maybe he'll go back to New England. Who knows? Belichick could try to pull something out, but I thought they did a great job. their first-round pick was DeForest Buckner, essentially, because they traded away their first-round pick. And if Buckner performs like he did last season, you know what? That's a pretty darn good first pick. And then you have Carolina. I agree with you. I think their defensive picks were really, really strong. I felt that, they got great value in gross machos. Jeremy Chin, he is a Isaiah Simmons light, I like to call him, because I think he has a similar skill set, rangy guy who can be moved around the field. And then, obviously, Derek Brown, that guy's going to plug up that line. And guys like Alvin Kamara, Todd Gurley in that division, you need to be able to win the battle in the trenches. And finally, with Denver, I mean, it was a very offense-centric draft for them. They got Jerry Jeudy. They got Hamler. They got some nice weapons around Drew Lock. And they've had a really good offseason as well. They signed Melvin Gordon. So they got 2 running backs in their backfield with Gordon and Phillip Lindsay. 3 very solid receivers possibly, and Hamlin, Jeudy, and Cortland Sutton. Drew Lock looks like he's got all the swagger in the world. They could probably compete offensively, honestly, with Kansas City.
And I was going to mention, just that division as a whole got so much stronger because obviously the Chiefs coming off the Super Bowl, they were presumably the top of that division. But, I mean, the Broncos and Chargers with the moves they made are not too far off. And I want to mention the Chargers quickly, too, because they could be added to that richer get richer list because of their first-round moves that they got with Justin Herbert. Obviously, they needed a quarterback there. I really like his game as well. I mean, Oregon quarterbacks in the past haven't had the best luck in the NFL.
Mariota played okay.
Mariota and Joey Harrington, they haven't had the best careers, but I think he could turn it around. He's a big, strong-armed quarterback, especially with the weapons they got him. They have a good offensive line. And Austin Eckler out of the backfield is going to help him a lot as well. I think even though he is a rookie, he'll have a very effective first season. And he could mirror up with the Chiefs that will be at the top of the division. And also forgot to mention Kenneth Murray, we mentioned in our previous video, one of the better picks in the first round as well. So, yeah, that division as a whole just got a lot better, and the Chiefs got some competition. It's not going to be a cakewalk, even though their roster is crazy and Pat Mahomes.
Except when they play the Raiders, but we'll probably talk about them a little bit more later. I will say with the Chargers, I would have loved to have seen them get a backup running back for Austin Eckler because he does have a little bit of an injury history. And now that Melvin Gordon is gone, I think having a 2 running back set won't hurt. But, yeah, I think the Chargers, they're built to win right now. They were 12-4 a couple years ago, like we mentioned in the first-round draft analysis. They got Mike Williams there, Keenan Allen, Hunter Henry, Herbert. There's so many young pieces I think that will fit well. Herbert, I think he could honestly win Rookie of the Year, given out of the 3 top first-round quarterbacks in him, Tua, and Joe Burrow, he probably has the best offense around him.
He's set up to succeed more than Burrow and Tua, or at least due to Tua's injury, he might not play at the start. And also, they are still rebuilding. They had a lot of picks in this draft, so they're going to be a young team, whereas Herbert has a lot of established veteran and solid playmakers, so I could definitely see that as well. But also, they did get a running back in the 4th round to help with Austin Eckler in Joshua Kelly out of UCLA. So they did address that. And also, if we could mention Joe Reed, he's going to be more of a kick returner. He's listed as a wide receiver, but he's going to be more for special teams, kind of a speedster there. So even addressing special teams in this draft, I mean, the Chargers, there's not many holes on that roster either.
Not at all. Not at all. All right, enough about the teams that did well because, frankly –
not everyone did great in this draft. We have to be real here.
There are some teams that I, frankly, am very disappointed with, and I'll give a couple teams and give my reasons why. First, New England. They didn't draft a quarterback. Granted, Bill Belichick said that was part of their strategy. They want to see what they can do. I honestly think they're going to try to make a move for a guy like Cam Newton, a guy maybe like Jacoby Brissett now that Jacob Eason seems to be the new backup. Josh Rosen, I've been tooting that horn all along, and I want it to happen badly. Come on, Bill. Maybe Mitch Trubisky as well. But overall, I think they traded out of round 1 when there were some really good players still on that board, and then they doubled up at both tight end and an outside linebacker, which is questionable. I'm curious as to what their direction is. Are they trying to win next year, or are they trying to retool and reload?
Based on this draft, I don't think they're trying to win. I feel like also because they didn't draft a quarterback, I feel like they're just trying to not necessarily tank. I mean, I think they're going to align more with what the Dolphins did and try to build a winning culture, but not really win games or put out a lineup that won't win that many games, especially with teams in their division improving. I mean, I don't see anyone topping the Bills in that division. So I feel like
Dolphins will probably finish second in that division. I honestly think it would be Bills, Dolphins, Patriots, Jets next year in the AFC.
I don't know. I don't know if the Jets will finish last. I could see them.
It's the Jets. Come on.
I know we say that, but it's also like the Dolphins. Like how good have they been recently? I mean, you could say that either.
It all depends if Tua's healthy and ready to go.
Yeah.
If Tua plays, I honestly think the Dolphins could. They won't make a push for the playoffs, but I think they can finish like a 7-9, 8-8 team.
Yeah, they could finish around 500. But I mean, sticking with the Pats, as you mentioned, they traded out of the first round, so they weren't looking for a marquee talent in the first round. Didn't draft a quarterback, which were kind of their bigger needs. And then with their first pick, they get Kyle Duggar out of a D2 school with people like Grant Delpit, Antoine Winfield, Ashton Davis, name any other safety, really on the board that they could have drafted instead because Xavier McKinney went right before him. He was the top safety in this draft. And then there's a laundry list, as I just mentioned, that could have went in that spot. And they kind of went with this Patriot-like pick where it's a kid you don't know and he might come out and surprise people, or maybe he's just a smart guy who can easily be molded in this Belichick defense. Right. But also I think it might have something to do with his Husky that made the pick, because that was one of the more questionable picks in the draft. And that was hilarious, though.
That was hilarious.
That was very cute. Yes. It was, like, perfect, too. Like, it looked like he was, like, zoned in on the computer and, like, looking at it. That was a great moment in the draft. Yeah. But you mentioned Kyle Duggar. I do like Josh Uche out of Michigan. They do like their Michigan men. They got Chase Winovich last year, who was an impact player. And now they
because Tommy Terrific came from there.
Well, yeah. I mean, there's no bias, but hey, it works most of the time. Yeah. Most of the Michigan men work.
Not all.
And then, as you mentioned, 2 tight ends in the same round back-to-back. And honestly, I thought there were better tight ends on the board. So I feel like they made more questionable moves. Most of these players I haven't even heard of. So they do go for the more unknown type players. And that is kind of how Belichick runs his team.
Patriot way.
It is the Patriot way. So, I mean, it's hard to discount them. This team's going to be so different than a team we've ever seen. We don't really know. I mean, we know how great Belichick is. They could be in playoff push next year, even with this squad, just based on the coaching alone. But I do believe, based on this draft, it's kind of hinting that they're looking more towards next year. They traded a lot of their picks for next year, so they're going to have a ton of picks next year. They're going to still need a quarterback unless Jarrett Stidham goes off this year. I feel like they're waiting for next year to really fix this and turn it around.
Yeah, I agree. And then another team that I thought, what is going on? Houston Texans. Blacklock is the only guy who I could see start for them, and honestly, that's a bit of a stretch, in my opinion, given how good their D-line is. Had a trade fall through with Detroit that they could have used to get a top running back, because who knows what's going to happen with David Johnson. And they still got Lamar Miller on that roster. I just realized. They have David Johnson, Lamar Miller, who are both very injury-prone. They could have gotten a top running back, and they failed to make a trade with Detroit. Personally, Bill O'Brien should not be the GM. I hate it when coaches or the GMs more often than not, because it takes them away from being able to focus on the field or on the court or whatever sport it is, because they're doing both. Some teams can do it. Belichick is one of those guys. Doc Rivers in basketball is one of those guys who can do it. Popovich, I'm sure, has a little bit of GM power in him, although he's not officially the GM. There's just, Pat Riley, another, although he never coached and GM'd at the same time, I don't think.
No, but he did both very effectively.
Yes, he did. But Bill O'Brien, he has shown he is so incompetent. And honestly, I think he shouldn't be the GM, and he probably should be fired, because sure, they've had success with him as coach, but nobody on that team likes him. Deshaun Watson, your franchise quarterback, I think has lost all trust in Bill O'Brien, given that he traded away his number 1 target for a 4th-round pick, and David Johnson, who when healthy is very good, but who knows if he'll be healthy, and essentially Brandon Cooks, who knows what his health status is. So I think Bill O'Brien and the Texans, they need to figure something out, because what they have going on down there, it's not going to work well going forward.
Especially with the Colts having the great draft and free agency that they have.
As well.
The Titans were just an AFC championship game. They're not going anywhere. Sure, the Jaguars aren't going to be great, but aside from them, they're going to.
They got better.
They did get better, but I don't know if they're still better than the Texans. Either way, though, they're on that type of level where it's not looking like they'll make a playoff run, even though they have one of the best quarterbacks in the league in Deshaun Watson. You just can't do that if you're Bill O'Brien. And he kind of panicked. You could see he kind of panicked with some of these trades because the DeAndre Hopkins one was very controversial. Then he turns around and makes this Brandon Cooks trade to kind of cover that up, and that wasn't a great trade as well. And then, as you mentioned, they didn't have a good draft. They didn't have a first-round pick. They only had 5 picks in general.
Yeah.
But, I mean, they didn't get great picks with what they got anyways, except for Ross. I do like Ross Blacklock, but, again, D-line wasn't one of their biggest needs.
No, it wasn't at all. And I think, frankly, like I don't know what – similar to the Patriots, I don't know where the Texans are going. I think they're going to try to win, but I don't know how much they're going to compete. I honestly don't think they'll make the playoffs, and I don't think they'll win more than 8 games. I personally – Deshaun Watson, great talent, great quarterback. I'll probably take him in fantasy if he's available, but I really don't know what's going on. They got 2 injury-prone receivers in Will Fuller and Brandon Cooks, 2 injury-prone running backs in David Johnson and Lamar Miller. Their defense
offensive line, except for Laremy Tunsil,
who they just re-signed. I just don't know what they're doing.
Contract in league history at his position.
Yeah, which is questionable at best because he is not a top offensive lineman. He's a top offensive lineman, but he doesn't deserve top offensive lineman money.
Not yet. He's still very young. I don't think he was worthy of that money yet. But, I mean, he's one of the only pieces you got now because Bill O'Brien traded most of them away. So you got to throw the money at someone, especially because once Watson's deal is up, I don't think they're going to have him on the roster anymore. I think he wants out of there. Especially
you think they won't re-sign him or franchise tag him?
They could franchise tag him because why wouldn't you? He's Deshaun Watson. But once that's up, I feel like Watson might even demand a trade if it comes to that point, depending on how bad the season goes. If it goes as bad as we think it'll go, I wouldn't be opposed to that.
Maybe that's what Belichick's waiting for.
Imagine that.
Oh, God, I would cry.
I mean, Belichick would know. He's planning something. Like, that's why, the draft, we agree, was not the best. But Belichick has something else planned.
Oh, yeah. There's always something under that hoodie. But then another team who I thought was very questionable, the Raiders. And it pains me to say because I love watching the Raiders because the Raiders are just a circus, if you will. And everyone's been saying this, it's the ghost of Al Davis because they take the fastest guy in Henry Ruggs. I love Henry Ruggs as a talent, don't get me wrong. But he probably would have been still on the board at 19 when they had their second first-round pick. They reached on him at 12 when you had guys like Jerry Jeudy and CeeDee Lamb still on the board. It was just like, what's going on here? And I honestly don't think he's going to pan out that great because he can't run the full route tree. He's really only good as a burner. And in college, he benefited from having 2 really good wide receivers next to him. So I'm very concerned about that pick. And then with their second first pick,
Derek Carr isn't the type that you would necessarily match with a speedster like Henry Ruggs. I mean,
he doesn't throw a deep ball. He doesn't.
Yeah, he doesn't throw the deep ball, which is exactly what Henry Ruggs' specialty is. He runs the straight line very fast. You get him, you throw it to his length, and he'll just take it to the house. Mm-hmm. But if you have someone like Derek Carr who can't necessarily do that at an elite level, I mean, what are you doing at that pick?
Right. Then they took with their second first-round pick at 19, Damon Arnett, which is
honestly that would have been one of the worst picks in the draft.
Yeah.
I mean,
Damon Arnett.
At best, I mean, I didn't see a single mock draft where he was a first rounder, and most had him as the 9th best corner.
Right. You get guys like Trayvon Diggs and Jeff Gladney who were still on the board that were first round picks, if I'm not mistaken. And I know we just mentioned it, but there's been a lot of guys who we mentioned, and it was one of those things where it's like, come on, Raiders, you're in a division with 3 really good passing offenses now at this point on paper. You need to stack up on passing secondary options. I don't know if they did that. They took 3 total wide receivers, which made no sense to me when they already had 8 on the roster. They have 11 receivers on the roster, Ryan.
I do think their best pick was Brian Edwards, though, out of South Carolina. I think he'll be the best receiver that they take, and he was the last one that they took.
Yeah.
He's also, Lynn Bowden out of Kentucky is considered a wide receiver, but he played quarterback. He's been at the running back position as well. So he does have offensive versatility, but I don't know how effective that will be at the next level, especially because you have Josh Jacobs at running back. You don't need that. You have all these receivers already, so it's like, where is he going to fit? What does he excel in?
Yeah, I agree. And then finally, they didn't get any pass rush to slow down the Chiefs' offense because that's what they're trying to do in that division. And we've been saying all along, they need to get a pass rusher ever since Khalil Mack left, and they still haven't done it. And I'm very confused as to what is going on in now Vegas. Mike Mayock, the guy was an NFL Network analyst. He would always do the drafts. I always remember hearing his voice. You'd think he'd be good at this. Maybe he was wrong. Maybe
it doesn't look good for us because we're in the kind of same situation.
Yeah.
So guys who are analysts trying to get into front office positions.
Mark Davis, hire me.
Yeah, let's see how that goes.
Yeah.
But also another thing that kind of the Raider way, you mentioned speed, but also Clemson products. I mean, we had Cleveland
SEC
and Trayvon Mullen last year. This year you got Hunter Renfrow last year as well.
Yeah.
And then you get Tanner Muse and John Simpson this year. And
Whatever team is at the top of the rankings in college, you're like, all right, we got to go there. Alabama, Clemson, LSU.
I mean, it's smart. I mean, you want to get the best players from the best teams and the best conferences, but also you got to take into consideration talent, value, position, all that stuff. And I don't think they really did a good job of that.
Let me ask you this. If we're in the NBA draft, let's say, and you got 5 guys from Duke, would you take all 5 guys, or would you take maybe one guy from Duke and maybe the best player on Syracuse or best player on a second-tier team?
Yeah, that's the thing. Like sometimes you mentioned this with Henry Ruggs, they benefit from having good players on their team as well. So in that Duke situation, only 2 or 3 might be really good talents, and the other 2 might have been piggybacking off the other talent.
For example, Zion Williamson, Cam Reddish, and R.J. Barrett. Cam Reddish benefited from having Zion Williamson and R.J. Barrett on that team.
I feel like that's another conversation, but I feel like don't hate on Cam Reddish too much.
I love Cam Reddish. I love watching him play, but he's still on his rookie year. But neither here nor there. Back to football. 2 more teams that I thought did not so great things in the draft, and they're in the same division. The Packers and the Bears. First of all, with the Bears, they got the top tight end in the draft in Cole Kmet. Kudos to them. But I don't really know what they're doing because given the top talent at tight end doesn't translate, a la Noah Fant and TJ Hawkinson. And did I mention they have 10 tight ends on their roster? They just signed Jimmy Graham. They have what are they doing?
None of them are good though.
Right.
So you need to that was one of their needs was tight end, and he was the best one available. So I don't hate that pick. And honestly, their next pick in Jalen Johnson, I thought was a good pick as well. But aside
I do agree with that.
And then they didn't have a pick until the 5th round. So honestly, that's the only thing I really don't agree with you that much. They didn't have many value picks in this draft. I thought they did good with the 2 second rounders they had.
But they had all these tight ends on the board. Why take another one when you knew they didn't have they had a lot of later round picks? Try to get guys who could help you immediately. Cole Kmet, personally, I don't think he will. I think a lot of the guys that are taken at the top, especially the tight end position, do not pan out as well as we've seen in recent years. There are some exceptions, but I'm calling it right now. Cole Kmet will not play well next year.
Also, it is a trend in the NFL.
I hope he doesn't. I hope he proves me wrong. Let's be clear.
Usually, tight ends don't excel in their rookie year. I still think, like you mentioned, T.J. Hawkinson and Noah Fant, they didn't have the best numbers. But, I mean, look at them this year. I think you might think differently. As we've seen tight ends in the past, it's just a trend. They don't excel usually their first year because they're not, like, the main targets or anything. And they kind of need time to develop in the system. I do think if they did get a receiver instead, that might have been of more benefit because aside from Allen Robinson, they don't really have much. And you want to see
Taylor Gabriel still on the roster? I don't even know.
What's up?
Is Taylor Gabriel still on that team, or
I don't think so. They have Anthony Miller, who's kind of like that type, and he did decent last year. But if you want to see if Mr. Trubisky's a problem, you can't have bad weapons because then you don't really know. So get him weapons. I think Cole Kmet was a decent weapon, but there were still good wide receivers on the board. I thought they could have gotten said with that pick to really evaluate Mitch Trubisky because this is the final year.
But they also got Nick Foles now, too. That's the thing.
That's just – I think they're going to start – or it depends on training camp and everything, but I feel like they'll start week 1 with Trubisky, and if he just falls off, Foles is there to try to salvage the season. But, again, I don't see the Bears getting out of that division.
I don't see him making it better than 4th, honestly.
I think the Lions are better this year, and they'll, supersede them.
Do you want to make – wait, you think the Lions will be better than the Bears, or the Bears will be better than the Lions?
I think the Lions will be better than the Bears.
Okay, I agree. Okay. I was about to make a bet with you right here and now.
No.
But then shifting gears to the Packers. What is going on? Jordan Love at 26. When there was so much other talent and so many other needs on that team.
This is definitely the most controversial pick in the entire draft.
Yeah. They didn't get Aaron Rodgers any help in the passing game.
The disrespect to that man. They disrespected him. They didn't draft a single receiver the entire draft. This is the most stacked receiver draft in recent memory.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just disrespect.
Yeah. This is a team in the Packers. I like the A.J. Dillon pick. He ran all over Syracuse last year. But they already got a good running back in Aaron Jones.
They have 2 good running backs. They have Jamal Williams, who's more of a real weapon. And then Aaron Jones just proved himself last year. He had a great season out of nowhere. Yeah. It definitely wasn't a need for them. Wide receiver was definitely more of a need. And then the third pick, a tight end out of Cincinnati, wasn't one of the top at the board. I mean, I don't know how I feel about that pick. And then most of the other guys I don't really know. They were 6th, 7th round picks. So they didn't have much value picks, but I don't think they did a good job with what they did.
Here's what else, with the thing with the Packers, they got no one who will be an immediate starter for them on a team that was got ran all over in the NFC Championship game by the Niners. They can be a Super Bowl contending team if they give Aaron Rodgers good enough pieces on offense and they can win on defense. They lost some guys. They lost Blake Martinez. Clay Matthews is no longer there. They've lost a lot of guys on that defense. They got rid of Demarius Randall. Clinton Dix, although he's been gone for a while. That defense is not what it once was. And I think the Packers management is thinking, oh, yeah, our defense is still what it is. It's not anymore. They needed to get some pieces on defense who could be really, really good. And then obviously, like we said, the disrespect to Aaron Rodgers. The guy is a future first ballot Hall of Famer. And yes, they did the same thing with Brett Favre. I know that's what people will say. Jordan Love is no Aaron Rodgers out of college. Aaron Rodgers could have been the first overall pick in that draft in 2005. Jordan Love was nowhere close to it.
I feel like this was almost a superstition pick because it's the same year. It's Aaron Rodgers. He's 36 right now. They got Aaron Rodgers when Brett Favre was 36. So they're thinking, ooh, and this was around the same pick. I think Rodgers was
25.
25.
Yeah.
Jordan Love's 26. So I think they're trying to just duplicate the past because it went so well for them with Rodgers. But I don't think it's going to go the same here. And also, I hear what you're saying with the defense, but honestly, I think that was one of the more strong shoots because they, in free agency, the previous year, they addressed it with Preston Smith and Zadarius Smith and Adrian Amos, solid pieces. Jair Alexander and Darnell Savage in previous drafts are solid for them, and Kevin as well. So I think most of their defense is strong, and they didn't draft any defenders in the first 3 rounds, so they focused more on offense. I just don't think they focused on the right players or the right positions. Like quarterback was not your first round need. I think it was more offensive line. You lost Brian Bulaga. You need to protect Aaron Rodgers because he got wrecked when they versed the Niners both times. Running back, they did not need help there either. They needed receiver and lineman badly. This was a good receiver and lineman draft, and they didn't get any value in that.
Yeah, it was overall Packers management disappointed me.
I would say they had the worst draft by far. I gave them an F.
I am a D+. I was a little nicer.
I think they just totally failed this. And I don't know, like Aaron Rodgers now with the new head coach, we thought it went kind of well last year. They were 13-3, but I don't think he'll trust him now because Rodgers doesn't have the best.
Trust LaFleur. I don't think he'll trust management.
Well, LaFleur they have a GM and LaFleur. Those were the two making the picks. So LaFleur had a lot to say in this. So, I mean, it's not looking good for the Packers, and especially with the Vikings having a good draft. I think it could be I don't know. It's not going to be a good situation for the Packers.
Yeah. One final team of note who I thought underperformed greatly were the Rams. The Rams, they got rid of Todd Gurley. And sure, he might have had all the injury history in the world, but the guy was a top 10 running back hands down, maybe even top 5, if you can make the argument. And I love the pick in Cam Akers, but will he have a bigger impact than Todd Gurley did last year? Don't think so, personally. And then barring a trade, they won't have a round 1 pick until 2022, which is concerning, and that means they have to hit on these picks. Van Jefferson and Terrell Lewis, their 2nd and 3rd round picks, are solid, but they have injury history. So that could be very concerning. They have a lot of work left to do. And like we said a little bit earlier with the Cardinals, this team will probably be the worst in that division by far.
Yeah. I see them in a very similar situation to the Bears. 2 years ago, the Rams had very strong offense. Bears had very strong defense. It got them to the playoffs. They got the Rams to the Super Bowl. And they got the Bears to the first round. But either way, they were both very strong NFC teams in the playoffs. Then last year, they had pretty disappointing seasons. Didn't make the playoffs. Lost a lot of pieces. Now they're in an even worse situation where they lost even more pieces. They didn't do great in the draft. They don't have a lot of draft picks. And I think they might both be the last in their division. I think they're in a similar path as that they're projected here and they just keep on falling down. And the weapons that they got aren't the best. And, yeah, I agree. The Rams didn't do great in this draft either.
Yeah, I agree. Is there any other teams that I left off that you want to make a note of real quick that underperformed?
I think we hit on most of the notable teams. One team – you know what? We're Giant fans. Let's just talk about the Giants.
We're ranting about the Giants.
Not talk about the Giants at all. I mean, I don't even know what to say. I feel like –
Xavier McKinney is going to be Landon Collins. I'm calling it right now.
Oh, no, I definitely agree. It's almost the same pick, same school, same position, and I feel like he'll be, like Landon Collins was, the best pick in that draft.
Yeah, I agree. I 100% agree. Andrew Thomas, I mean, if you like the guy so much, we said this earlier in the first round draft recap, it was they liked Andrew Thomas enough clearly that they felt like he was the best offensive tackle, so they took him. Kudos to them. They could have possibly traded down, but you run that risk. And then after that, they got some offensive linemen, which was a big need.
Yeah, I mean,
and then
tackle out of UConn 3rd round, how valuable is that going to be? And I saw a graphic last time we did that was Will Beatty, and he was a total bust. So
he wasn't a total bust. He had some solid years. He had some injury issues. That's what did Will Beatty in. But other than that, though, Matt Pert was the offensive tackle out of UConn. They took 15th overall rated offensive tackle according to ESPN. So I'm sure there were some guys better there. But they got a lot of linebackers. They got 2 outside linebackers, 2 inside linebackers. And
6th round or later, though. Like, that's one of the needs that they had was inside, outside linebacker, and edge rusher. They didn't get a single edge rusher.
They didn't get a single edge rusher.
Our biggest need. I think it was I forget what round it was, but Curtis Weaver out of Boise State was on the board, and I thought that would have been a great pick because he was falling.
Right.
I forget where he ended up going, but I thought that would have been a great pick for us. We definitely need an edge rusher, and we just totally ignored that position and didn't even in the later rounds get one. We just no edge rusher at all, and I feel like that was one of our biggest needs. So that's why I'm not a huge fan of the Giants draft.
Yeah, and I will say, too, the Giants, when they won that Super Bowl, their 2 Super Bowls, there were 2 things in common. They could run the ball, and they could rush the passer. Saquon Barkley's a great runner, but he doesn't have a lot of protection running at
this draft hopefully proves that wrong, though,
right.
Because a lot of these – another thing to add, a lot of these tackles and guards that we did draft were run-heavy type passers. I mean, type blockers. Like Andrew Thomas is known more for his run blocking. 5th rounder out of Oregon, Shane Lemieux is known more.
Oregon loves running the football.
Blocking.
Right, I agree with you on that statement there. But also, they had a great pass rush, like I was saying. Justin Tuck, Michael Strahan, OCU Minora, some guy, Jason Pierre-Paul in the 2011 championship. Just guys who could get to the quarterback. Or was JBP 2011? I don't remember. Neither here nor there. But
we still definitely had Justin Tuck and I'm pretty sure OC at that time was.
The thing is with that is you could get to the quarterback. The Giants don't have that guy, at least not right now. Maybe one of these picks that they got could be that, but they need someone who can put pressure and who they keep getting rid of their guys too. They got rid of Damon Harris a couple years ago. They got rid of Jonathan Hankins a couple years ago. It's just like at some point they're not going to be able to keep getting rid of guys because they need someone on that line who can get pressure.
Also, I don't know what we're going to see out of the new defensive coordinator. He's from the Dolphins. They didn't have the best defense by any means last year. So I'm really worried about that defense. Our secondary, we definitely addressed and have some good young pieces. Yeah. But aside from that, I mean, it's looking pretty iffy.
It's looking very iffy. But let's round this out, Ryan.
Yeah.
Who are some picks or just some things that you really liked about this draft as a whole? Maybe not necessarily like teams that overperformed. Just what was your biggest winner, biggest takeaway from the draft?
I'd probably say in terms of steals, we mentioned both the receivers, CeeDee Lamb and Jerry Jeudy. I didn't think they would last till pick 15, either of them. They both lasted past that. I think those were 2 of the biggest steals. Also, we mentioned Zach Bond for the Saints. I was shocked he dropped that far, and I think that was a really good pickup for the Saints as well. Mm-hmm. And, yeah, I'd probably just say them.
Yeah, I agree with you there. I think the wide receiver class, like we've said, could be the best in history. There's some really, really good talented guys. CeeDee Lamb, Jerry Jeudy at the top, Justin Jefferson, T. Higgins, Brandon Ayuk, Michael Pittman, Henry Ruggs. Like, just some really overall good talent there. And I think overall my big takeaway from this whole thing is that teams, given the circumstances, they handled themselves really, really well. There weren't any major snafus, and I think the draft went smoothly, and I think a lot of teams got better. So I think that will mean a lot of competitive football whenever this 2020 season. But the one concern is there won't be any rookie minicamp. There won't be any OTAs, probably not a full training camp. So these rookies are going to be asked to do a whole lot, especially the first-round picks. Guys like Joe Burrow, Tua Tagovailoa, Justin Herbert, the guys who were in the very important positions on their respective teams, they're going to be asked to perform very quickly, and they won't have the same amount of reps that in a traditional offseason, they will. And frankly, what I think they should do, 2011 was very similar with the lockout. A lot of these guys should reach out to those guys in that 2011 season who were rookies. How did they handle it? What did they do? Obviously, things are a little bit different because you can't really go anywhere because of this pandemic and social distancing. But how you handle the situation you're given, we're going to see which rookies are meant to play in the NFL and will succeed, and which ones were all hype but won't really amount to anything once the season starts, because you can see who prepared and who didn't prepare during the offseason.
Yeah, I agree with you there. Kind of a little bit of a piggyback. Teams with new head coaches and quarterbacks are really going to struggle because they have new playbooks to learn, just new connections, just totally that they didn't have before. Like
Right.
the Giants, new head coach, second-year quarterback, whole new coaching staff, new OC, new defensive coordinator. Teams like the Redskins, they got a new head coach, second year. Even though Dwayne Haskins
Ron Rivera's been around
all
too.
year, he's sorry, what?
Ron Rivera, head coach for the Redskins, he's been around a whole lot. By the way, that's one other thing. Chase Young, I can't wait to see him play for the Redskins.
Oh, I can wait. I don't want to see him.
I don't want to see him either. Like, in that regard, I get what you're saying. But the guy is from the area. He's playing for his hometown team. Him and Dwayne Haskins. Whew, that Redskins team can have a bright, bright future ahead of them.
That's the same with Joe Burrow, another hometown kid playing for his team, and I can't wait to see how that all unfolds. Because now, I mean, the Bengals are picking number one for a reason. They were bad last year, but with the picks they made, they had some pretty good moves in the offseason. I mean, they'll still be probably towards the bottom of their division, but I think they're giving him more help. He's not going to be stranded on an island like some quarterbacks of the past might have been. And I'm really looking forward to see how his cool attitude is going to work with their whole team as well. Yeah, I'm looking forward to the season. It's definitely going to stink for some of those new teams with new coaches and new quarterbacks to try to, communicate and learn.
Especially the first-time coaches. Those are the ones. Matt Rule, Joe Judge. Like some teams with new head coaches like a Mike McCarthy in Dallas or a Ron Rivera in Washington, those guys have been around, so they know the drill. But it's those first-year head coaches that are in deep, deep doo-doo if they can't get this right. I'm trying not to swear,
Lack of a better term, but yeah. This is a PG podcast.
Yeah, for the kids, for the brand. But it's those first-year coaches that they won't be able to meet their rookies, meet their new players, meet their coaching staff, because a lot of the staffs have been reshuffled. So it'll be interesting to see. And those teams might be at a big disadvantage come the season.
Yeah.
Any final thoughts, Ryan?
No, that's it. That was the grading of the NFL 2020 draft.
It was fun. I'm excited. This draft went off without a hitch. Kudos to the NFL, ESPN, and NFL Network for the joint coverage, the NFL for seamlessly making things. It felt like we're starting to return to normalcy with the NFL draft. It was the first big-time sporting event in a long, long time that we've been waiting for. And I thought everything went well.
Sadly, this will probably be some of the last football we see until maybe the preseason, with all the offseason stuff maybe not happening or happening over Zoom or just not going to be the same. But I'm looking forward to some more sports coming in the future. I mean, tonight in 8 minutes, we got episodes 3 and 4 of the Jordan doc. Can't wait for that. Episodes 1 and 2, outstanding.
Yes.
And
we're talking Dennis Rodman. That's all you need to know.
Yeah, and he could definitely take up 2 episodes worth of coverage because
a whole 10-part series about it.
They can make a doc just on the enigma that is Dennis Rodman.
I think they already did. I think they did a 30 for 30.
Yeah, I wouldn't doubt it. But yeah, so
Ryan, thank you guys so much for joining the Chips podcast. As always, for listening. For Ryan Amick, I'm Tyler Melito, and we'll see you next time.